So I have pleasure in introducing Professor Thakuriah, who is the Thakuriah Chair of Transportation at the University of Glasgow, currently working in between the School of Social and Public Policy and also in the School of Engineering.
Thank you, Joseph, for inviting me to present, first of all. And I found, like the previous speaker, that I should speak on data instead of Brazil. So here's my thoughts on how urban data can be a very important solution in addressing some of the limits on urban growth. But at the same time, it's also a very challenging solution to get it right. And I hope to give you a couple of thoughts on that through this talk. So I think governments all over the world are very interested in getting urban data infrastructures in place. And this is sort of not a new thing. I mean, it's always been there. I mean, we've had censuses and surveys on cities and urban systems from, hundreds of years ago. But I think the momentum has changed. I think there really is this new concept of urban data, urban big data, that's very exciting and topical these days. But then the question is, does better data allow better urban decision making? Okay, and basically, how do you do better planning, better urban planning, policy making, governance, resource management and operations of cities, management, and what do you do with the data to understand whether you're making progress on some of the big urban agenda questions that we've been talking about, such as sustainability and social inclusion. Now, I mentioned big data, and it's one of those words, it's like urban sprawl. I mean, people know what it is sort of, but really there are so many different definitions of it, it's sort of hard to understand. But it really is data that exceeds, there are large volumes of data that exceeds the processing capacity of conventional database systems is one definition I've heard. And the volume and the rate at which the data flows in and the variety of it, and the heterogeneity of it, is mind-bogglingly different from, sort of the more spreadsheet type of data that we had before. But at the same time, urban big data, particularly an urban linked big data infrastructure, is not necessarily only the sort of big data I think that is understood in the urban informatics world. I think it could include a variety of different data sources, such as open government initiatives are leading to open data on cities, huge amounts of data on transactions done by government, on where crime has occurred in the last 20 years, or at a very detailed geographical level, property taxes, transport, energy, and all of that. And then there's also this issue of privately held data or confidential government data that has been in government vaults. Can we open it up? Can we link it with some of the more traditional sources of data we have in urban areas? And what can we do with it? And what sort of technologies do we need in order to have these sort of really closely guarded, privately held or confidential government data opened up? So that's a very important question, I think. Then the urban planners historically have had, large-scale urban simulations and models, and then those models and tools tend to generate vast amounts of data also, synthetic data, if you will, modeled outputs, and that itself is an important source of knowledge. And the more recent discussion on urban big data has really focused on these last 2 points over there. There are all kinds of infrastructure-based sensors in cities, road inductive loop detectors measuring traffic, CCTV, what have you, all over the place, energy systems management, water management. They tend to produce a lot of data as well. And they particularly, in the case of this sort of data, from the computer science perspective, has really opened up this paradigm of machine-to-machine communication that will remove humans from the loop, because you have so many billions and trillions of everyday objects that are going to be embedded with sensors and whatnot in the near future. And really, there's the requirement for human intervention in the sense controls communicate chain falls, and the need for direct machine-to-machine interaction increases. And although this might sound a little scientific fiction-like, it's already happening in many ways in cities around the world. The other aspect of big data, of course, is user-generated content, social media data, and data coming from a variety of different ways in cities. Data where people, ordinary citizens, are recruited to do citizen science projects, participatory sensing, let's say, human computation, or what we call volunteered work for agencies by leading, by participating, like crowdsourcing of design ideas and so on. And so the direct involvement of citizens in producing data for cities is perhaps a newer concept, although even that is not new, because I heard that in Glasgow, in Scotland, 100 years ago, they used citizens to generate a health map of the city. So what we call volunteer geographic information, which is a very hot topic now, is also got a 100-year history. So I think it's very important to see many of these new data sources have such a long history, have a long set of knowledge, knowledge base associated with it. At the same time, some of the right questions either didn't get asked or they didn't get answered correctly because the right people were not connected with the right data. And I think that's a very important point. And again, continuing with some of these new initiatives, data and cities are indeed very topical, and there are all kinds of concepts out there that are being floated around. Smart cities, which definitely has, in my mind, an efficiency and technology-oriented smart management, city management sort of an idea. Then ubiquitous information cities, learning cities. Joseph is more thinking. How do you make cities of the future lead to good learning outcomes, lifelong adult learning, let's say, or good behaviors on the part of its citizens, good healthy habits, sustainable behaviors, and all of that. So I think it's the same data infrastructure, but you're looking at what you can do with that data in different ways, and you can use it for a variety of different reasons. One interesting thing that's happening in all of this new data stuff with cities is the generation of what I'm calling urban digital intermediaries. This is novel new ways of organizations who are fostering information communication technology and data-centric approaches to studying, managing, and engaging in cities. So in a recent study, we found, for example, there are 4 specific classes, if you will, of these urban digital intermediaries, consisting of 10 different types of specific organizations, ranging from really smart city type companies, which includes business units of comprehensive ICT businesses, down to the one-person app developer who's working 0.5 FTE time, 0.05 FTE time, sorry, in the middle of the night, unpaid, because he's passionate about cities and wants to build an app out of open data that's being pushed out of government. Particularly in that space, I think this urban, open, and civic data intermediaries are going to play an important role. These are open data organizations, civic hacking organizations, people, especially individuals who are interested in good outcomes in cities and at the same time have some programming or developer type skills, and who are, I think, increasingly going to play a very important role in connecting citizens of the future with big open urban data. I think it's not going to be all government or big private companies like smart city companies and so on. So these emerging informal networks of civic hackers, civic technologists, and open data organizations are really going to push the boundaries, I think, of urban big data in ways that were not there before. So I would like to leave you with 3 challenges in terms of does better data lead to better whatever else. The first one is more data does not equal better data. That's point number 1. And the first challenge I want to mention is there are some very significant technical questions rather, associated with making this urban data infrastructure in a shape, size, and format that will allow people even to take good decisions. And I can speak from my own example. I've had a fair amount of experience working in the transport sector in particular. We had a massive database of several worth of weather data from Navtec. They were acquired by Nokia Location and Services. And we linked that up with transport data, which they also had. And these data came from all kinds of GPS sensors in cars and infrastructure-based loop detectors and people generating travel times and so on out of their smartphone and all that stuff. The short of this long, big, huge project was really the sense that it is so difficult to get it right from the beginning to the end of the data life cycle to actually put 2 massively dynamic urban sectors like transport and weather management, and to use one sector's data on urban weather data to predict, future congestion and traffic management for another urban sector is very difficult, especially given all the additional other issues such as privacy and information security and all of that. So I think technically we have to pay attention to this urban data infrastructure. Second is that connecting linked data to decision making, and more importantly, action on the basis of this information, is not something that happens automatically. And in this particular example, we studied real-time bus arrival times, which was instituted really in Chicago, where I was previously before moving to Glasgow. And we used a lot of bus arrival time data from GPS sensors in order to make all kinds of studies about how much impact it had made on ridership. So effectively, with the study we came up basically said that, well, in the early years of bus tracker, as it is called in Chicago, deployment, bus boardings, controlling for a whole lot of other factors, didn't make a lot of difference. People didn't know what bus tracker was. You have to get used to this technology. There's a learning curve and experience and changes in attitudes, habits, behavioral intentions of people. When you throw technology at them at the city level, it takes time. And in the left picture, it really shows how we feel controlling for all these other factors that also affect bus ridership, how ridership levels increase over time as a result of bus tracker. Now, this right-hand picture showed that many of the bus stops where there was no gain in bus boarding actually were in areas where there were massive foreclosures of houses because of the economic recession in the US. And the reason I'm bringing this up over here in this talk is that we went with all this data to the transit company, especially how the spatial variations of data adoption and all that. And they were not necessarily interested. It was not considered to be a transport problem. And I at that time was the director of a transport center, and I didn't know how to bring the vast majority of other people in there to work around the data. So I think that's the second big challenge we have. Data fragmentation follows the silos of government. If you can't break down the fundamental silos of government, data is not going to tell you a lot. The third one is, how do you connect data to better life in the city? Social equity, inclusion, better learning environments, and more engagement and among the citizens. I think including the diversity of what citizens have to offer, and taking up the value that informal intermediaries can produce, like civic hackers, and also developing better models, I think, of how government can include citizens directly in through models of incentive, cooperation, transactions perhaps, How do you connect citizens directly in the business of providing services that were traditionally done by government agencies or large companies? I think that's a possibility that gets opened up with this kind of data models. With that, I'd like to leave, that's my last slide. So.